Most leadership breakdowns don't happen in big moments. They happen over time when messages lose precision as they move through the company. And what starts as a clear decision at the top turns into mixed priorities, slow execution, and teams pulling in different directions, even though everyone thinks they're aligned. If you've ever felt like you've said something clearly, only to watch it show up completely differently in execution, this video is for you. Because the problem isn't that your strategy is wrong. It's that your message isn't surviving the layers of your organization. So in this video, I'm going to show you how leaders people actually trust and follow prevent that from happening. And it's not by talking more, but by building a system that keeps clarity intact as it moves from vision to action. So today you'll learn why strong messages decay inside organizations, the exact way top leaders frame direction so it doesn't get reinterpreted, and how to reinforce strategy throughout the week without micromanaging or having to repeat yourself endlessly. So if you want your words to turn into consistent action and not confusion, stay with me. This is how clarity of communication becomes leadership. When it comes to clarity, it always begins and ends with leadership. How you set the tone at the top is exactly how it's going to be understood all the way down throughout the different layers. The trick is figuring out how to make sure that what you wanted at the top doesn't become something else when it comes to execution at the bottom from your individual contributors. Now, let's talk about why teams don't act on strategy. Now, ultimately, that has to do with not being clear enough at the top. So, as an example, what I've seen before is a C-suite leader, most likely the CEO, would say, "Hey, listen, we are going to dominate enterprise." And so, what seems to be clear at the top in leadership, right? This is the vision that the C-suite leader has. We are going to go dominate enterprise. That's going to be the focus of this company. Now, if that's all we're really talking about, there's not a lot of additional detail. There's not focus. There's not a way by which people can make decisions. You have different outcomes, different negative outcomes that end up happening. So let's look at that. So if you heard as a manager, the manager level, hey, we're going to dominate enterprise, you might have a sales leader think, okay, that means we need to go after companies that have 2,000 plus people. So that's interpretation number one. You might have a tech leader that says, okay, well, if that's the case, then I need to make sure that our tech is in line with what enterprise needs, because I guess we don't have what's required if we're going to dominate enterprise. You might have somebody in marketing say, okay, well, I guess the focus for us in terms of how it is that we're messaging to the market is not right. So we have to change what that looks like. So you have three different interpretations. And so when each one of these leaders on the manager level then communicates that down to the teams, each one of those is going to have their own interpretation from there. And so because of these different ways in which the managers are looking at what it means to dominate enterprise based on their own understanding, then you'll have the teams pulling in different directions. You'll have one team going this way, another team going that way, another team going a different way, instead of having everybody go in the same direction. And so that's what happens when it's unclear what we mean when we communicate, even though it might be super clear at the top, because by the time it makes its way all the way down into the organization, it's changed its meaning. And so that's the big problem that we have to fight. That's one of the biggest reasons that what feels clear at the top doesn't end up as the execution you want. And then the next thing you know, you're not making the progress you want. You feel like you're stalling and you're starting to question, hold on, is my strategy wrong? Do we need to rework what we're doing? Is it my talent? Are people not motivated? When in reality, it's the actual communication of what is it you want and how it travels in the organization. So let's look at how we can change that. How can we take this concept of dominating enterprise and make it clear in a way that it doesn't decay as it goes through the organization? So call this the Monday frame. And here is how I would look at it. We want to be able to get rid of this concept of just we're going to dominate enterprise. Let's get rid of that. Here is a way by which we can communicate that more clearly throughout the work. So here's how I would recommend saying something like this. For the next 2 quarters, we are prioritizing mid-market enterprise customers with 500 to 2,000 employees. because that's where our product delivers the fastest measurable ROI. That means every team should be asking, does this help us win and retain those accounts faster? There's a lot of change from dominating enterprise to this. The very first thing is that it provides a timeline. We have 2 quarters. The next 6 months are going to be focused on enterprise. So we know, great. First of all, what timeline are we working with? Second of all, we are providing specificity and focus. So we're talking about 500 to 2,000 in terms of enterprise. So before we talked about maybe somebody in sales interprets dominating enterprise as 2,000 plus. If that's the case, and that's not what leadership meant, leadership is fine with anywhere from 500 to 2,000. We've just lost tons of potential opportunities, and that's an example where the focus goes the wrong way. So here we have that focus. We also have a decision-making framework where we ask, does this help us win and retain those counts faster or not? And so someone can measure, okay, is the work that I'm going to be doing now helping us towards getting 500 to 2,000 in terms of this kind of customer or not? And then it also provides trade-off, which means we are not going after companies that have anything uh, less than 500, and we're not going to go after companies that have more than 2,000. And so we're also narrowing down what the trade-offs look like. And the ultimate part here is that there's purpose to it. And the purpose is that is where leadership believes that the product delivers the fastest measurable ROI, because clearly this might be a company in a growing phase. They have to be able to show numbers. They want to be able to scale really fast. It might be to get to the next funding round or to just hit maybe milestones that if they are associated with a PE firm that they have to hit. But the bottom line is that all of these come together in the way that it is messaged, and it is done so quickly. It is done so consistently that it is almost impossible to misinterpret. We have a timeline, we have a focus, we have a decision-making framework, and we have trade-offs. That's what we want to do. So once we have that, once the message is clear and people know what is expected of them, why they're doing what they're going to be doing, it is up to leadership and the entire company to reinforce this message at every layer and every opportunity. So it's not just said once and disappears, but it is rather the entire mantra of the company, and it is said over and over and over again to the point where it just becomes part of somebody's DNA. So as an example, start with a Monday leadership meeting with all of the C-suite, all of the senior leadership team. You open with this sentence, hey, want to remind everyone, this is what we're doing for the next 2 quarters. This is why we're doing it. This is who we're going after. And I want you and your teams to always ask yourself, are the decisions that we are taking helping us get there or not? Because that is going to help you decide, should I be taking this action? Should I be focusing on this customer? Should I be investing in this tech? Should I be leading with this marketing message? Each one of those things is a trade-off. It makes it so much easier to understand, should I be doing what I'm doing or not? And that is what speeds up execution more than anything else. Then when it comes to your Tuesday all hands, you're not talking to the whole company. Say it again. When it comes to any type of, let's say, a Wednesday Slack update where you're telling everybody, hey, here's what we're doing. Here are the progress reports we're making. Just want to tell you what's been uh, happening around the company. Reference it. Hey, as it relates to us going after customers within 500 to 2,000 employees, just want to give a heads up and a big props to sales that have brought 50 new prospects into the pipeline. Again, reinforcing it. When you have one-on-one meetings as a leader, connect feedback to it. Hey, I know you were running that campaign last month. It was working really well. The numbers look good. At the same time, we want to make sure that we are hitting our ICP. And so while those metrics are nice, I really view them more as vanity. And I would prefer that we focus our messaging and our targeting and our ads specifically to these enterprise clients and prospects that have anywhere from 500 to 2,000. That's what I need you to do next. So we're connecting feedback to it. And then lastly, when it comes to Friday wrap-ups, when we have meetings throughout the whole week, measure against it. You're meeting with an individual contributor. What have you done towards this goal? What does your focus look like? What have you stopped doing and started doing? When you do this over and over and over again, I'm giving an example of a week, but ultimately you're going to have so many meetings throughout the week. You're going to have so many connection and communication touch points. Referencing this and tying every action to it is what's going to reinforce this throughout the org. And it's going to make sure that the message doesn't decay as it goes from leadership to managers to teams to individual contributors. This is how we do it. But it all begins with that clarity at the top. So this is ultimately this entire system, what I just described, it's known as the cascade system. And this is where you ensure that it doesn't decay as it moves throughout the company. And as we discussed before, all of this starts at the top. And leadership have to own the narrative. You have to be able to give people a reason, a purpose, a why behind why we're doing what we're doing. Without it, people are flying blind. They feel as if they're just moving, but not achieving momentum. When it comes to the narrative, it's a combination of why do we exist? Where are we going? What are the actions that we're taking to get there? And what is your role in all of this? And when we break that down to more specific actions, like the message of, hey, listen, for the next 2 quarters, this is our strategy, this is why we're doing it. This is where we have to be incredibly crystal clear. So it is incumbent, it is critical for leadership to be able to understand that is the role. Communication is everything there. Because if we don't focus on the communication, the clarity that needs to go around it for others to understand what is that we want from them, you're going to have the company going in multiple different directions, and it's just going to stall all the growth that you want to achieve. And so that clarity of communication, that clarity around the narrative that you're creating, when that trickles down to the managers, it makes it much easier for them to then own what's called a translation, which is how you take that strategy. Like for us going, for the next 2 quarters after enterprise firms between 500 and 2,000, how we take that strategy and turn it into weekly language and actions, meaning here are the things that I need you to do, teams and individual contributors, because this helps us achieve that goal. This is why they need that clarity, because if the managers don't have the clarity, they will guess. They will fill in the gaps where you don't. And more often than not, it's not going to be what you want. And again, it's not because of them. It's not the talent. It's just they do not understand what it is that leadership wants. So if they don't understand what they want, what leadership wants, they are smart, they're great, they're going to make their own determination what that looks like. That's where things go wrong. From there, we then have to speak to individual contributors, and this is what's really interesting. This is where they own the execution feedback. So now typically what ends up happening in communication is that people treat it like a broadcast system. Like I'm just going to talk at you, at you. But from my experience over time, there's no mechanism by which you then get information from the bottom to understand how well things are working. So my biggest recommendation in these situations, whether it's a Friday wrap up or whatever date that you want to choose, understand from your individual contributors in your teams, okay, this is the strategy we have. That's leadership. Next, managers talk about here are the actions I need you to take. This is the way we're going to measure whether we're doing it well or not. Then it is up to the individual contributors to talk about what's working and what's unclear. We need to have a feedback loop. So the managers hear back what's happening. So it's not just, hey, here's what I need you to do, but we have a full circle where they return and say, hey, this is what's been working well. Here's what's unclear. Here's what I need unblocked. And that can happen both on a one-on-one basis, but also as a team. And when you have that and you can understand what's working, what's not, managers can then fix it themselves and you can keep going in this kind of virtuous circle. Or if it's important enough or problematic enough, the managers can then feed that back up to leadership, and leadership can then decide on a more strategic level what is that they need to do. For example, hey, I know we talked about enterprise firms from 500 to 2,000, but I'll tell you what, we've been noticing this really resonating with firms that are actually a little bit higher, from 1,000 to 2,000. And we're spending a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of effort on 500 to 1,000, and that's not working really well. And so managers and leadership can decide what they want to do with that information. Do we continue and still go for 500 to 2,000, or do we start throwing away any companies underneath 1,000 and anything over 2,000. That is up to leadership, but that only happens once you have that feedback loop and that feedback mechanism. And that's part of the cascade system where you're not just broadcasting, you're making sure that it's clear, but you're also getting that feedback from the bottom. And this repetition, this reinforcement of messages, of clarity, is something that can really drive and save companies from problematic situations. And I want to give an example from my experience, and that's the Volkswagen diesel emissions crisis. So this is something that I worked on for about 2 years. It was a really awful situation of the company where they were ultimately cheating the emission standards in the United States. They put a little device in their engines that made it seem as though the emissions coming out from the vehicle were not as bad as they actually were. And so they rightfully were taken to court. Pretty much every three-letter agency in the United States took their pound of flesh. They were sued in all of the different states in America. And, it was a massive, massive reputation hit for the company. No, the point is not to talk about the crisis itself, but what's more interesting is the reputation recovery that they had over time. So they had to pay restitution. They had, I think it was a $24 billion fine. Now, they were hemorrhaging trust because this is something that was just in the news. This was the only thing associated with the company. And when we think about branding, branding is just an association between two things. And so the only association between Volkswagen that used to be seen as such a great and reliable brand was this scandal, this crisis. So Volkswagen crisis scandal. That's the association that was being created. And so they had to figure out, well, how do we get out of here? We went from this situation where we had a crisis that was a huge problematic moment to this valley, and they needed to then get up and be able to earn people's trust again. And if that crisis is or that valley is where that crisis was, where trust is super low, we needed to go back up and earn that trust. So part of it was their 2025 plan, how they're going to improve the company, and then their longer term vision, which is electrification by 2030. This is part of them showing a better and clear future. And they put a lot of money into this. Obviously, there was the money that they had to pay uh, for what it is that they've done, but then also the investment that they decided to put into electrification by 2030. So that's batteries, that's electric cars, and they really, really poured into it. And as importantly, it wasn't just some white paper or some type of PR that the company did. This was a massive change in their strategy. This was leadership at the top saying, look, we know we have this crisis, but this crisis gives us an opportunity to improve. This crisis gives us an opportunity to build a better company for the future. This crisis is what is going to allow us to really earn trust back from our consumers. And we have to do that. And the way we're going to do it is with electrification. That's the future where the world is going. And so this was a message. This was a strategy. This was something that was reinforced at every single level of the company. This was repeated by the CEO. Came from the board. They had this in all of their press releases. They talked about this in employee town halls, in investor calls, in earnings calls, in media interviews, and on and on and on and on and on. This is the focus. And so the brand change here, the association with Volkswagen is electrification, electric cars, the future, Volkswagen. That's what's come together. And that's what they've been doing. And the way they've been able to do that internally and externally had and always will remain the focus on reinforcement. What is the messaging? What is the focus? What does it mean? What are the trade-offs? Meaning, for us, if we, by the way, look at that framework from before, they gave a timeline, 2030. The trade-offs, we're not going to be doing petrol cars. We're going to be reducing that over time. There are decision-making frameworks. Are we getting closer to electrification by 2030 or are we not? Are we then making the investments that we need resource-wise? Yes, it's 100 billion. All of that came together with the messaging to make this clear and to make this a reality. And I have this little graphic here of Volkswagen and Tesla. And it's so interesting how you look at these companies over time. Now, when Tesla started, it was the hottest thing ever. Um, but I wonder how many people really know what their vision and their mission was, and maybe still is, which is that they really wanted to from a vision perspective, move the world towards sustainable energy. That's the vision. The mission, which are the steps that they take to make the vision a reality, is to build the most compelling car company of the 21st century. That I think is obviously a phenomenal goal. That is very much in line with the kind of trust and the way that Volkswagen is now acting. But over time, the problem with Tesla is that positive and negative is that it's very much associated with Elon Musk. And regardless of how you view him, in the beginning, he was seen as the guy who was really pushing for saving the environment and sustainable energy. And now he's associated with less great things. So people are not associating Tesla with all of those wonderful qualities. And Volkswagen, that began as just a normal, everyday kind of good, solid car you have, wasn't associated with the crisis. But now they're seen as one of the leaders when it comes to electrification. And that is the power of being able to reinforce messages, make it clear to everybody what you stand for, what you do, how it matters, and it touches your bottom line. So that is what it can look like when you do things the right way. And I want to leave you with a framework by which you can then ask yourself, well, am I doing this well? Am I communicated what I need to communicate to the company well enough? So I have a decision tree for you that you can follow. And this is based on the ECHO test. Now, the ECHO test is the method by which you can evaluate how well and how clear is my message across the different layers of my company. And so I'm going to give you like the smaller, tight version that you can just do tomorrow or as soon as you have your next all hands. So here's what you can do. Grab 3 employees and different levels. That's important at different levels, and ask 2 questions. The first is, what is our top priority this quarter? And the second is, what are we doing this week to get there? So here's your decision-making tree. For question 1, when we ask, what is our top priority this quarter? If they get it wrong, meaning they don't understand that we're focusing on mid-level enterprise between 500 and 2,000 people, and that we're going to make trade-offs towards that. If they don't have that, there are major issues around strategy, the objectives, and specifically their role in achieving it. So that's something that has to be fixed at the highest level. Clarity is completely off. We need to figure out that top line message. Now, if it is correct and they got it right, we move down and we understand, and this is great, means for us, strategy is clear. Great, thumbs up. Then we move to question 2. What are we doing this week to get there? Here we go. So if they get it wrong, it is because we are not specific about the action that they have to take. And so next time that we communicate to people, whether it's on one-on-one, through smaller team meetings, through all hands, whatever method, it is to be more specific about the weekly actions to achieve that quarterly goal. Hey, we don't need you to work on a campaign, even though it's great metrics for this kind of audience. We need you to go after this prospect, even though the metrics will be hard in the beginning because it always takes marketing time. That's an example of the specific steps that have to happen. On the flip side, if they get that question right, like, hey, I need to stop this campaign and I have to go after that campaign, congrats. You have Cascade that's working. You have what's called an intent to impact gap that's closed, meaning what you want it to happen and what is actually happening. That gap between those two things is very narrow. So what do you want to happen? What happens? Almost immediate. Phenomenal. And the answer is keep going. You're in a good spot. That is a really quick test that you can figure out. Is my message clear? Do people understand what we want to do on a strategic level? Do people understand why we're doing this and what is expected of them, most importantly? And here's what's really cool. After 4 weeks of this, your team will start using your exact words in their own meetings. And that's what we want. When people start using our language themselves, that's where we know we've really nailed what it is that we're trying to do. And so that's when you know the system's working. That's where you're going to see execution speed up and up and up. And that's when you become a leader people actually follow because they understand what you want. They have the clarity that they require and they can just go and do their job. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to do a good job. They want to feel as if they're doing a good job. And what's really great about this particular thing is not only will they do a good job, but you're going to be able to hit your goals, scale, profit, efficiency, everything that you want, the impact that you want to make in the market. This is it. I'm going to put the full breakdown video of the Cascade system somewhere up here if you want to go in depth into what this should look like in your organization. And if this resonates, This is the exact work I do with CEOs and leadership teams. I help leaders get their message clear before the moment demands it. And that can be with board meetings, at all hands, investor conversations, and crisis moments where words truly matter. So if you want to pressure test how your communication is landing, DM me 313 on Instagram or reach out on LinkedIn. And until next time, keep leading with clarity.